whereas what the goal was to make the combat more engaging.
So, what exactly went wrong with Path of Exile 2's combat? There are quite a few things that contributed to this outcome in my opinion, and I'll try to discuss them one by one. First and foremost, we have to address all the problems it inherited from its predecessor, and this is quite the list. They introduced skills and mechanics that go against good combat by design, such as contagion, thorns, minions, totems, trigger skills, and so on. By design, these skills simply aren't compatible with engaging combat unless they would have been heavily reworked. With minions, for example, you can't expect to have meaningful combat when an entity other than yourself does everything and absorbs damage for you with almost no downside to them. GGG should have made significant efforts here to redesign minions in a unique way that would have made them compatible with engaging combat, or give up on them entirely. Same can be said about any other skill that doesn't hit the mark. The next big issue that came straight from PoE1 is monster-related. More specifically, monster density, monster mods, monster speed, on-death effects, and so on. All of these are almost identical to their PoE1 counterparts, which cause direct friction with the idea of engaging combat. When you have your screen full of monsters that engage with you at the same time, you are left but with one realistic option: to wipe them out before they wipe you. So it's no mystery that people will be focusing playing skills or builds that are good at dealing with those situations. While I've played around with specters, another issue that became apparent to me was that monster skill design is really simple, which really goes to show that they weren't really thought through properly as standalone encounters that could pose a real threat to you while also being engaging to fight. What this means is that even if they were to reduce monster density, make them deal more damage, and have higher health pools, that wouldn't really translate into more engaging combat. Unless, of course, they redesign them to be much more complex creatures to fight with well-telegraphed abilities, much more similar to bosses, really. Another side effect of having your screen full of mobs is, of course, a severe lack of visual clarity. Monster mods the way they are now are also a terrible decision for engaging combat. They should have been approached in a completely different way. I'd argue that the best decision for mods would have been to be approached similarly to a player, and by that I mean that mods could have given monsters different abilities based on their individual type, not some random stat boost. And since we're talking about random stat boosts, let me bring up an issue which is perhaps the most puzzling one to me. More multipliers, specifically on support gems. Why is it puzzling, you ask?
We ended up having supports mostly exist as a way to boost your damage directly, which is cool, but there are plenty of other mechanics in the game that also boost your damage, so we don't need to use the support gem system for that. Support gems, we've really focused on taking them away from being damage boosts and put them more about customizing the skill.
They correctly identified the problem years ago, yet here we are with support gems being primarily used as damage multipliers. I honestly have no words for this one. What even happened? Support gems should have been only a way to customize the skills, not scale their damage, like they correctly assessed back then. This is one of the main reasons why player power grows to uncontrollable levels and absolutely destroys any semblance of balance. More multipliers are probably the worst thing that they decided to bring back from PoE1. Other mechanics that make no sense to have been introduced the same way they were in PoE1 are, for example, evasion and passive block. It makes absolutely no sense to have these mechanics in a passive manner when you quite literally introduce their active counterpart. Neither of those promote engaging combat. There could be some ways to make evasion work as an active ability alongside dodge, such as, for example, for it to be some sort of an active ability that makes you evade the next hit during an animation. to facilitate a skill with a long cast time, or other similar ideas that actually require you to react to your surroundings. Another big problem is the fact that there is too much power provided by gear, which causes several different issues by itself. One of the clearest issues with this is that balance becomes incredibly hard to manage when player power is largely dependent on random drops. We've all seen the different reactions of players and their experiences in early campaign across the patches. The core issue wasn't really the lack of crafting, but rather the power of items you could have obtained by doing so. One of the most blatant examples of power on gear is skill levels on such items. I honestly think these shouldn't exist at all, as they boost the power of your skills to ridiculous levels. The difference between having those and not having them is night and day, and that should change.
From my perspective, this game feels like a true evolution in the genre. It's the pacing, the combat, the dodge mechanics. What were you guys trying to accomplish with this? Because it does feel like an evolution. It doesn't play like any other ARPG I've played before.
So it really was an effort to make that combat feel just like, just much better. I love action games, you know, like I'm just a big action game player. So I just wanted to make something that to me felt like a decent action game.
I also love action games, Jonathan. But this is definitely not what an action game feels like, and I have no doubt you know that too. I hope you haven't abandoned your passion in favor of other people's opinions.
An action game fan, I want us to be good on the level of an action game.
Yeah, so actually this lines up perfectly with this. So one of the things that I noticed actually getting hands-on time with the game was that every encounter that I got into, regardless of whatever character I played or how far I got into the game or how much gear I got or skills or whatever it might be, every single encounter felt meaningful. And it was in a way, and I was talking to some of the other creators at the event, and I said that this doesn't feel like a second monitor game anymore. Because like Path of Exile, Diablo, these are games I got YouTube up on the second monitor. I'm watching something else, and it demanded my attention at every given moment. Otherwise, I very easily could lose, even though it was fighting something that otherwise I could probably overpower. Oddly, it reminds me of Elden Ring in a lot of ways, because it's just that engaging.
The closed betas were not doing, and I was kind of like, Jesus Christ, it's a fly. Sorry.